Hello everybody, and welcome back to Ctrl+Alt+Degree, where I am once again serving as your procrastination station of today. This will be a space where the chaos of student life is not only normalized but also embraced. If it is your first time here, welcome. I am very glad you have joined me, but if you are returning after the first episode, thank you very much for sticking around. Today's topic will be something I've had cooking up in my mind for a while now. It's this idea of how to handle your day-to-day life and the myth of having it all together. Balance. Balance is a word that gets tossed around constantly when we talk about student life. But what does it actually mean? University isn't about studying hard and acing exams. It's also about figuring out how we manage our time, our energy, our emotions, and that is very messy. For me, balance means recognizing that not every day will be productive. And that's also okay. Some days procrastination isn't failure, it's feedback. It is literally your brain telling you, hey, I'm tired, we should quit for today. And let's be honest, no one truly has it all together. Not your classmates, not those students with those aesthetic study with me videos we talked about in the previous episodes, not even the ones who seem like they ace every test, they ace every exam without even breaking a sweat. You might say, oh, what's the difference? The difference is that you don't always see them struggle. We are told to balance school, social life, rest, ambition, self-care, exercise, and no one will explain how. More importantly, no one mentions that balance isn't a perfect split. Sometimes balance looks like choosing a nap over working until you're tired, or letting yourself scroll through TikTok without guilt, or saying, you know what, this isn't working for me today, and it's okay, I'm going to do something else. Balance isn't about perfection, it's about self-awareness. It's about giving yourself the grace to adapt. One of the hardest parts of student life is the way procrastination sneaks in, especially when we are overwhelmed. When we're given the choice between something challenging and something comfortable, we will always choose comfort. It's a very human thing to seek comfort, and we as students are still very much human. And then when we go online to look at tips and tricks from other people, what is the advice we often get? It's two different kinds of advice I often hear from peers and influencers and so-called productivity gurus. It tends to swing wildly between way too relaxed, as if you're saying like, oh, don't worry, motivation is okay, you just do whatever you want, you move whenever you want. Or it is so intense and overwhelming that when you try to do it, you're tired before you even start studying. Neither of those approaches feel helpful to me. What we need is something real, something human, something that makes a structure that isn't rigid and able to change on the fly, but also something useful. So, let's first talk about the emotional side of university, a part of the experience that I think rarely gets enough attention on its own. There is this quiet expectation that by the time we reach university, we'll have figured things out. But nobody tells us how emotionally exhausting the journey and discovery can be. Our highs are high, passing an exam, making friends and having breakthroughs, but the lows are quiet. You are alone with your scream at 1 AM and you're wondering, why can't I keep up? What is wrong with me? There's something very important to note here, that a lot of people and peers around you will show every single one of their highs, every exam they ace, every test they get right. But when they fail, they'll be quiet. They don't see anything, which makes you this biased idea of only you failing and all of the people around you succeeding or having it easier. But this is far from the truth. This feeling is very common. You're not failing, you're adjusting, and adjusting to university is hard. You're learning a new way to live on your own, you're studying, you're thinking in a different way. Feeling like you're falling behind doesn't mean that you are. It means you're officially a real university student. A real friend of mine once said, "A good student is no more than 2 weeks behind their lessons." And my first reaction was, well, a good student is not behind their lessons. But then I realized what it really meant. It is a way of thinking that it is better to do things on your own way and tempo, but consistently, than trying to keep up with all the work, get overwhelmed, and then not do anything at all. That is why it is okay to fall behind, if you keep up your consistency and perseverance. We live in a world obsessed with output, with grades, tasks, hours, results. But there's a lot of effort that takes to show up. Those 45 minutes you spend trying to start, that half an hour you take trying to travel, that's effort, and that counts, but it doesn't show, and that is very difficult. If you're feeling guilty for wasting time, ask yourself, was I really wasting time, or was I just recovering from being constantly in motion and working and going and being efficient? Waiting for motivation is like waiting for the perfect weather to go on a walk. It may never come or be too late. Action often becomes for motivation. So I want you to try this instead. Instead of I'm gonna study biology, you start by opening your slides. Then you try to think what you were talking about in rough lines, what are the subjects. Then you try to think of a fun fact you remember and you want to tell to a friend. Then you try to study and keep the fun fact in mind. That's it. Momentum builds up, but you need to allow it to build up instead of forcing yourself to immediately lock in. And this might seem counterintuitive with what you hear online. Things like, keep the easy and fun things for last, do the hard things first so they are done. But like we said in the previous episodes, this advice seems to be made for people who don't struggle with motivation. Because if they did, then they wouldn't begin with the most difficult thing first, they just wouldn't begin at all. When we talk about motivation, it will always get followed up by talking about efficiency. When you're working for uni, there will always be a certain kind of dread, a feeling of I could do more. And it's important to understand that you will always have the feeling of I could do more. But you need to understand that you don't always need to do more. However, it is very important that you remember that you need to do your work. How much each day or how many chapters doesn't matter. The only important thing is that you're doing something. Not all the time, just do something. Unfortunately, a lot of the common advice about productivity and efficiency often boil down to something like you just need to work harder, be more productive. And that advice can easily start to sound like you should spend every single waking moment on school or your job or working. But that is not realistic. It is also very unhealthy. There is this very unhealthy downward spiral, which starts with the idea, oh, I should do more. And then you do more. And then you think, oh, if I could do this, I should do even more. And then you do more. And you're thinking, oh, I could do even more. If I could do it, then I can do now more and more and more. And then it builds up until you're so full of pressure that you just get frightened of the idea of starting. So you think, oh, I could do more, but now I can't do more, so I'm not going to do anything. And in the long run, that leads to procrastination. Something I've come to realize is that when people talk about productivity, what they often actually are talking about is time efficiency. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. The real challenge isn't about finding more time, it's about making better use of the time you already have. You have more than enough hours in a day to get the things done that you want to do if you approach it in a smart and, most importantly, sustainable way. The difficult thing is that sustainable is different for every single person, and that's why I dislike social media study tips so much. They don't think about the fact that everyone approaches it differently, everyone has other needs, and everyone needs to find out what works for them. And in the long run, one of the most unexpected challenges of university life is dealing with those large chunks of unstructured time. Coming from your high school schedule, which was every minute was mapped, you had your lessons, you had your timetables, and you needed to show up, and now suddenly you have this whole day free. It can feel amazing until you realize free means constantly busy. So on your so-called free day, you wake up thinking you have all day to do some things you want to do. And somehow, when you start and you're doing a little thing and then you're stopping again and then you're doing another little thing, and it's 4 p.m. and you haven't really done anything. I think it sounds very familiar for me. It sounds very familiar, but I think a lot of students have gone through this problem. And this is also the place where a lot of guilt creeps in. And trust me, I've been there, I am still there. But the problem is not laziness. It's a combination of decision fatigue, lack of structure, and being overwhelmed by everything all at once. Too much freedom can be just as paralyzing as too little. What has worked for me will surely not work for everyone, but I will talk about how I approach my day, how I approach too much free time, and how you can try to think about it. What has helped me is building loose frameworks. No rigid routines, but just a light scaffolding to hang my time on. I divide my days into 3 chunks: the morning, the midday, and the evening. And each of these three chunks I will splice into 2 again, and then I can fill in how I want. So, let's break it down. Say you sleep from 11 p.m. to 9:30, which is very generous amount for a uni student. That still leaves you with 13 and a half hours. Take away the meals and your morning and evening routines, you maybe have 10 or 11 hours. I really meant to study those 10 hours all the time? Of course not. Personally, I work best when I break my day into chunks. Again, no rigid schedules. So, currently I get around 3 hours of really focused work spread across those 6 smaller pieces, and you can fill in every single piece how you please. We've got 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening. It gives me structure, but also freedom. And this is a very important thing, because you need to switch between work and break. But things like the Pomodoro method really don't work for me, because short breaks pull me out of the flow, pull me out of the momentum, and then I need again those 45 minutes to build up the momentum, and then after those 45 minutes I take a new break and the momentum is gone again. So that is something that clearly does not work for me, and that's okay. So now I will give you an example of what a loosely structured day might look like. I wake up at 10:30. I woke up late, so that's my first of the 6 blocks. Then I will work from 11 to lunch. That's the second part. Then I eat lunch. And then I take a longer break, like 30 minutes or one of your Netflix episodes. Then in the afternoon, I will start another block. This is the third part. Then I will relax in the middle of the afternoon. Then I'll start again and work until dinner. Then take again a longer break. And then I'll work my 5th part. And then the final block, the 6th part. The idea is that between those blocks you have a break, a longer break, but a marked break. But it is without any obligations. If you have something planned, for example a class in, let's say, roughly the 1st, 2nd blocks, you can adapt my idea to work around it. You can say, oh, the 1st and the 2nd block are lessons, the 3rd block is getting home and relaxing, and the 4th is studying. This creates a rough frame with a structure, but no pressure, and that is the idea. So try to let go of thoughts like, oh, I must finish this assignment by 6 p.m. sharp, or oh no, this article took me all day, I failed and I'm not good enough. Instead, try to aim for something like, I worked steadily today without forcing myself, I showed up, I made progress, and I worked. This kind of consistency beats intensity in the long run. There's a famous saying, the best day to plant a tree was yesterday, and the second best day is today. And this is also that idea. You can always do more and work harder, but if you don't, the best thing is to just do. Let's be honest, grades feel like your self-worth. A 14 out of 20 hits hard, even though it's 70%. And in high school I would be completely fine with 70%. But when you see 14 out of 20 on your exam, you're like, oh, I made it, but I barely made it. And why is this? It is mostly because of the numbers, but the university shifts the scale. Average feels like required, but you are not your points. You are not a percentage, and your intelligence, your potential, your values as a person, your creativity and logical thinking, none of those can be summed up in a grade. Even though university makes it seem like the points are everything and getting a good grade is required and expected instead of a reason to celebrate, but the problem is that this is also what drives the fear for failing, the fear for doing nothing and getting bad grades, and that's why a lot of people preemptively quit. And this is a very important issue, because a lot of people talk about university and studying like it's a perfect, idealized version. And if you gloss over it, it will look like an idealized version. But we do not live in a perfect world. So why are people not talking about those imperfect things? Because they hurt. This is a very important part about why people don't admit their faults and their errors. But this is something we will talk about on this podcast. A lot of things I will be saying about motivation and efficiency are in suboptimal conditions. If you can work, you just work, there's no problem. If it's easy, you're doing it. But if it's not easy and university still requires you to do it, it's way, way harder than people imagine. You know those classical sayings like, practice makes perfect and you learn in failure, not in success. And they feel corny and stupid, but unfortunately there's a very real truth. In mistakes, there's learning. So try to think about it like debugging a program. When something goes wrong, the error message isn't personal. It is informative. The computer says, oh, I couldn't find this file. And you'll think, oh, okay, cool, now I know what the issue is. And the same should go for grades. It's just difficult because we don't see the feedback. The problem is that when people work with computers and they get an error message, they immediately click away and run the process again to try something else, but they don't change anything. And then they get the same error. The problem here is not the error, but the way you deal with said error. When you run a program and it gives an error message that said, oh, I couldn't find the file, you know exactly what you did wrong, and you know, most importantly, what you need to change. Adapting to university is a lot like those error messages. When you don't get to read the message, for example, bad grades in university, instead of clicking it away and just thinking, oh, I suck, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, try to think of it as feedback. Try to think of where it went wrong and how you could change it to get better. Not just study hard, but really change something. For example, when I got a 9 out of 20, I thought, wow, this stinks, why did they do that to me? And then I went and looked at the exam and I saw I got a few points from a lab assignment, a few points from the multiple choice, and 0 points from the open questions. So now, when I need to redo this course in August, I know that my knowledge on the multiple choice level is enough, but I need to heavily work on how to formulate and learn those open questions. And when I successfully do that, then and only then will I have succeeded in fixing the error, not just doing more or shoving it to the sides. So, ask, what went wrong? Why did I not succeed? Was it the material? Was it the way I studied? Did I have a blackout on the exam? Be curious about your errors, and not cruel. It's not about I failed, it's about I learned what doesn't work. And this is real positive growth. It's way more useful than pretending you always know exactly what you're doing. So we've nearly reached the end of the episode, and there's still a lot I want to talk about. If you want to know specific things or specific items, if you have anecdotes or just something you want me to incorporate into the next episode, you can always tell me. But here are a few things I just want to sum up so you get the overall idea. First is the time blocks that we talked about. Divide your day into flexible segments. The second is don't think that you are not doing enough. You're doing more than nothing, and that is perfectly okay. The third is might as well. So, might as well start bio, for example. You sit down for 10 minutes and commit. Try not to do anything else. You don't have to finish it, but just start for 10 minutes. Then, if it works, you will keep going, and if it doesn't work, then you stop, you take a break, and you rinse and repeat. The fourth one, and the more important one in this segment, is the outside feedback. So I'm going to start this with an anecdote. A friend of mine was struggling with balancing all of her time issues. She had a very difficult timetable, and that made it so that she never really showed up to class. So, to motivate her to come to class, we bought a bunch of lollies, and every time she showed up, we gave her one. This reinforced the idea of other people know my problems and achievements and will thus try to support me in becoming a better version. This will put a little more pressure on yourself, but also make it so other people can give you positive feedback and say, oh, you're doing great, instead of you just needing to tell it to yourself. Combining something physical to it, like a lolly, also makes it so you can really have a tangible thing instead of waiting a whole semester to see the results. But it's just a little side note. This is also the same reason why a lot of uni students go to libraries, to feel the pressure of other people around them. The problem I have with libraries is that the pressure there is more judgmental and negative pressure, while the motivation of the lollies are more a positive achievement. But anyway, I digress. I will talk about libraries in another episode. So this was the second episode. It was a little bit longer, but you can always let me know if you want the longer or the shorter formats. I think motivation, balance, and efficiency are very important things. I could make hours of content talking about those three, but I'll keep it for this length for now. So for a closing thought, I just wanted to say, you are doing better than you think. Even if today felt like a mess, even if nothing got crossed off your to-do list, even if you procrastinated for hours, the fact that you care, the fact that you are here, listening to me and reflecting, means that you're already trying. This is something very beautiful to remember. Lazy people do not worry about being lazy. Bad people don't reflect on how to do better. If you care enough to want to change, you're not lazy, and you're not failing. If you're willing to change your habits and put effort into this, you are and will never be lazy. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be productive every hour. You just have to keep showing up for yourself. So thank you once again for being here with me on Ctrl+Alt+Degree. If this task manager resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. You can leave a message, a comment, or share this with someone who needs it. So that was it for now. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and your future self. After all, they're all on the same team.